welcome to the Greens Health Show. We're going to dive deep into the science of peak performance and resilience. Today, we're honored to have Dr. Christopher Myers, with a decorated military veteran, a Bronze Star, and a Service Medal recipient. Dr. Myers' journey has taken him from the battlefield to the forefront of sports science after retiring as a captain. He turned his focus into the human body as the founder of three sports science and a exercise physiologist for the U.S. Air Force. He's now shaping the future of human performance optimization. Author of two books, not one, but two books. The Triathlon Training with Power, in his most recent book, The Human Weapon System, which we're going to talk about today. Blends sports science and innovation together. Let's dive into the deep end of performance science, understand how to train like an elite athlete. Dr. Myers, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the kind words. Appreciate it.
All right, Dr. Myers. So here are some of the rules of the show. I have my attachments here. All right, just like LinkedIn, Whenever there's a light bulb moment, you'll get one of these. Whenever there's a moment, you'll get one of those. And as well as expect some jokes, okay? So it's a lighter mood. I'm going to start off with a lighter question here. And I know you start the days off. One of the funniest things I heard you tell me is when you start and end the day, but more importantly, how many times you eat throughout the day. So let's start off with that. How many times do you eat throughout the day, and what are you craving right now?
Food, actually. But about 6 to 7 times a day.
Yeah.
I eat about 6 to 7 small meals throughout the day.
Yeah, and is there any method to your madness of eating 6 to 7 times a day?
It's a lot of trial and error through the years, through my time as a semi-pro athlete, just kind of learning my needs and stuff. That's really kind of what it is, and just understanding how my body works and nutrition. But sometimes you just want to go in and you crave like a sandwich or something. So you go to the commissary here and just grab a nice turkey sandwich. Really try to plan as much as possible. I mean, luckily with the job and the way I work out, it's pretty standard. At least for me. So I can kind of work with that, and I have a very, very supportive wife who really helps out with the meal prep and stuff like that. So,
no, that is actually very good, and it's interesting because you hear so many things about other types of eating programs. Some may only eat 1 or 2 times a day. Some may fast. There's other programs I heard that you talked about where you eat multiple times a day. And the science behind that is all energy, right? How much energy input do you need per day, depending on your situation, the mission. And one thing you talk about in the book, your needs analysis. So it sounds like you did your own needs analysis.
Yeah, it really comes down to, from that needs analysis, what are your goals, right? So, for example, if you're looking for aesthetics and you're looking to you're not really focusing on performance, right? So if the idea is to lose some weight, or even for, beach body, right? Spring break, whatever. That's where intermittent fasting is really good for, right? Now there's you got 3 different types of intermittent fasting in there, and you go from, I call them easy, medium, hard, where guys they won't eat for 24 hours, or they'll do this 20-hour fast and eat all their bolus of calories in a 4-hour period. I think they call that the warrior strategy. Don't quote me on that. But there's different levels, and the research does show it does work for that, for a short period of time. But it does sacrifice performance. There's even there's a line of research, because again it's energy availability, right? It affects your ability to do it and to recover. Now, there is a modicum of research that shows, if you're doing the 12 and 12 hours fasting, 12 hours eating, where you'll have a drop in performance, but then it'll come back up to where it was. You really won't gain, but you'll get back to where you were. So that's what I'm saying, is really looking at your goals and what you're trying to do. Now the downside to something like that is the yo-yo effect. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
you just have to watch that and be aware of it. And again, it's just doing your research, understanding the pros and cons, yeah, and then the benefits and the consequences of the style you're doing. And understand that a lot of these fad type things are, at least what I would call them, are just short term.
Yes.
So now I know guys that do intermittent fasting quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to work for them, right? And that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But for mainstream, it's really not. Is if we look at these tend to be outliers. So you got those. You've got the ketogenic diets, right? We hear about these pro athletes that are on the ketogenic diets where you're eating less than 20 grams of carbs a day to really get to increase that lipolysis,
Lipolysis.
which is burning fats,
Okay.
energy systems. It all
Okay.
comes down to energy systems, and it works for them, but for the main person, it doesn't. Right? So you just got to do the research, and it is a little bit of trial and error too. And just speaking with with subject matter experts, right, within that needs analysis and getting the right information.
I'm glad you said that, Chris, because for the past 5 years, we've seen trending on Google. New Year's resolutions all about can be about weight loss, nutrition, new diets, and fad diets, and how something like intermittent fasting may work in the short term or maybe a fad diet, and it may help you reach some aesthetic goal. But what about your performance when you're working during the day? And how you can have less energy to be your best self at the office or at your desk or at your day to day office. So that's a great consideration. I'm glad you shed the light on that. So we can see how the energy is lost based on these different fad diets like
Right.
intermittent things of that nature. Um, Chris. So is that an interesting point? Does that make
It
sense?
is, but it's not just the what you're eating, right? So if we think of our plate, what we eat all day, it's usually what we focus on, but we don't look outside of that to other factors, right? So for example, what are we drinking? Whether it's a lot of guys like to drink Gatorade throughout the day. They don't account for those calories. Don't even get me started on the energy drinks. We've got those smoking, nicotine, alcohol. I
Wow.
love my German beer, but you got to look at those. So for example, like if you look at a can of Bud Light, that's an extra 120 calories. If you're here in Germany, you're drinking a bottle, just a bottle of German wheat beer, which is by far the best beer ever made. That could be upwards to 500 calories.
Oh yeah.
So people aren't focusing on that. They just focus on this, but not think about this.
Yeah.
These other side things. So you got to look at it when we talk holistic. We got to widen our picture and try to encompass all that and figure out what are the good and the bad habits, because again, at the end of the day, this is all habitual, and try to make those minor changes, and that's what will help with
Well, yeah.
sustainable weight loss and lifestyle change.
Sustainable weight loss is there's things outside of nutrition, and there's things that are holistically looked at. And one of the things you mentioned when I hit this for you guys to pay attention on is what are we drinking,
Yep.
right? We don't come up with when we say the diet, no one really thinks about the liquids as much, the sodas or the
Right.
energy
So for
drinks as
example,
much.
coffee, right? Coffee itself.
Oh, coffee. That's
Big
a
coffee
big
drinker.
one.
I'm
We're
a
better.
coffee
Hey,
drinker.
okay.
And I'm a big Starbucks guy. Missing out here, but big Starbucks guy. But coffee itself is not bad. I mean, within reason, right? If you're drinking 8-10 cups a day, then there's the caffeine issue. But just with the black coffee itself, just regular 6 ounce cup, is not bad. It's actually really good. Antioxidants, a couple other things. It's the stuff that we put into it. It's the creamers. It's the frou stuff. It's the chocolate, little things like that added up that goes from the coffee to a hot dessert. So it's little things like that, right?
Hot dessert,
and it's just, or it's instead of just, or it's a portion size. But it's okay to have them, but maybe instead of getting the grande, maybe getting the tall, right? Little things like that. It's just so really looking at what you're doing. It's not saying deprive yourself. Moderation is usually the big thing, and that's the biggest thing I learned here in Europe is we are definitely we are oversized stateside here in Europe. It's much different. The portions are smaller. um, it's just definitely cultural changes, which have
Mm-hmm.
definitely helped me for one to kind of maintain because I love to eat. That's why I do endurance sports. But it's definitely helped me with that too, and that's another thing lesson learned when you ask me about the meal sizes is just living here. In
Mm.
Germany for most of my adult life,
Mm.
so it really helped me with that.
Yeah, that's a good point. You pointed out a couple of things there, Chris. Right now, guys and gals, and fans who are watching the show, we're in Germany. And it is definitely a different culture. But it's also one of the good things about Germany is that Chris crank out some awesome books that we're here to talk about as well that goes into the culture of creating peak performance holistically from a nutrition standpoint. Nutrition, just not food, that's also liquids that you put in your body. Psychological standpoint, musculoskeleton standpoint. I think there are other two domains as
Yeah, so
well.
it actually is much more complicated than that. Well,
Yeah.
not complicated, but it really again goes back to that needs analysis. Really, how depth do you need to go? Of course, you got to take into account personnel availability, funding, fiscal. That a lot of those guidings in there. But when one of the lessons learned that I had when I started this position with the Air Force as a physiologist was the fact that when we talk about human performance optimization HPO, it's usually 4, 5, or 6 domains, which is your skeletal, musculoskeletal, nutrition, medical, social or spiritual, psychological, and cognitive. And sometimes the social, cognitive, and the psychological are collapsed down to one domain, but they are definitely distinct. And there's also other flavors in there as well.
Mm.
That's 6 domains right there. But we often tend to forget other sides of the human itself is you need to look at education, policy, the regulations that guide the programs you're in, life cycle management. So, cradle to grave type stuff, beginning of a career to an end of a career, other little facets of it. And I've learned that we've even talked about 16 upwards to a 16 domain model. But
Wow.
but you're talking that's very comprehensive.
Yeah.
That's at an enterprise level,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's more than just the what we typically find and what I'm even discussing here because again it's limited on space is a different way of looking at our tactical populations. And so the term that we typically hear is tactical athlete.
Mm-hmm.
These guys will even the first tell you they're not athletes. And they're not because if you look at an athlete, their daily regimes are really regimented. They know when they're going to go to bed. They know when they're getting up. They know when they're eating. They're told what they're eating. They know when they're working out, the recovery, when they're getting massages. Everything is regimented. For tactical populations, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Tactical population.
so we're talking firefighters, we're talking military personnel, law enforcement, even first responders. And so there's a lot of similarities between these tactical populations and athletes, but it's the minor differences that really are the keys to this. So it's the type of stressors that they're under, how the recovery standards, what they have to go in and day out versus athletes. And that's what I really tried to tease out in the first couple of chapters is that's why I like the term the human weapon system because you're a human being. The term that really is when you initially talk to someone is that really kind of maybe flusters a little bit is weapon. Because typically when we think about it, it's something that destroys. And if you look at the base definition of a weapon, all it is a tool, right? And a system. And so a human being is made of different subsystems, right? So that's why I like the term the human weapon system. So that was initial. I found literature that initially had this term in 2009. I can't remember the article off the top of my head, but we do quote it in here. But it was never defined. And so that was the other thing I wanted to set out with is actually define what the HWS is. And then also tease out the differences between a tactical athlete versus this more holistic approach with it. And when I'm talking about those different domains when it comes to human performance. And so it's not just focusing on the big 5 or 6 when we traditionally see with D1 or athletic programs. It's more, it is more holistic than that. It's actually broadening our picture of that and looking at education policy, regulation, life cycle management, data.
Yeah.
We can talk that data in itself should be its own domain as well, right? So it's not just the tangible systems of the human body, which the traditional HP and HPO programs focus on. It's taking a step out, look at some of those exterior, not stressors. What's the word I'm looking for? Influencers, right?
Yeah.
And bringing those into it as well.
Excellent response. So, Chris, you mentioned quite a 16 plus domains. We only talked about 5 here. One of the things that we talked a lot about individually that's outside of the book is the data domain and the emerging topic of AI and using data driven decision making to make training more nimble.
Yeah.
I would love for you to elaborate on, what does that mean to you and how does that work?
Yeah, so with the position I'm in is I to give people a little more context. So I work within that MSK domain, the musculoskeletal domain. We call it MSK for short. And if you look at it, there's usually two or three of us professionals that work in there. You've got the physiologist. I'm more known as an exercise physiologist. So I work more on that performance maintenance domain. And you got physical therapist who works more on the rehab, and we meet in the middle, right? So it's a spectrum. We work hand in hand. We're two sides of one coin. If we're lucky enough to have an athletic trainer, which is a great bridge, that just makes the team even stronger. So I focus more on kind of that transitioning out of the rehab maintenance, getting building back up to the performance side of the domain. Just give a little bit of context. So within that, I work with several personnel at one time, right? More than 10. Let's just say
more than 20.
Yeah, more than 20. It's a large number of people.
Yes, very good.
About the size of a football team.
Okay, so that's very good. Very good. Very good.
But so within that, it's one coach. Usually with a football team, you have several coaches and assistants. I'm an N of one. So on that, so I have to leverage technology, different data streams, biowearables, to be able to get just even basic data to understand, for one, how are they feeling that day. You can talk to everyone, but there's still other stuff going on. But how are they adapting to a program, right? And that's the issue with an organizational level program is how do you still individualize it at an organizational level? I would love to be able to write, an individual plan for each person, but I can't. There's just not enough time in the day. Maybe if we move out to Jupiter or something where it's more days, but I can't. So I need assistance, and that's where it comes through the technology. And so that's the first piece. That's what I'm trying to get after with that. And the way you get some of those basic insights is just regular technology, but to get these deeper data-driven insights is where the AI and the machine learning come in. Now, I'm not saying, okay, have the AI do the job for me, but let's say we have 5 data streams, right?
Okay.
Coming in.
What type of data?
Let's say a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM.
Okay, we like that.
Yeah. So CGMs. Let's say Oura Ring, right? So Oura Ring giving us a sleep recovery, HRV
And
stuff.
CGM does
blood glucose monitoring.
Blood glucose monitoring. Yep. Okay.
So we've got that. We got sleep and recovery. Let's say we got basic smartwatch, which can give you your heart rate throughout the day.
Okay.
So we've got that. We got activity trackers, whether it's whether it's tracked just by steps, or if you're using, like we use Bridge Athletic to put out our strength conditioning programs and track it.
So you can actually see someone squatting, benching.
Exactly.
Okay.
Get really dialed in training stress measurements or something like that. So we got these convergence of these data streams. And what we can use the AI to help us dive into is a convergence of data streams and maybe give us a red flag and say, hey, such and such are below certain parameters. You need to explore this a little bit more. So for example, let's say a guy's been coming off consistent injury and he's healthy, but why does he keep getting these musculoskeletal injuries, also known as MSKIs?
Okay.
And so what we can have, say we have the data stream coming in from all their lifts and their conditioning. We're doing range of motion testing, which we have automated and stuff, and the AI can look at that and say, you know what, for this guy, you are seeing lower limb injuries. His hip flexion is actually below normal standards. You may want to look at this, dive in a little bit more. What's causing that? And that can help dial it in a little bit, a little more individualized for that person to maybe help reduce their injury rates and and improve their time to recover, which is we would try to get after, especially with human performance programs, especially for tactical populations. The other side of that too is just on the performance side is, okay, this guy is not improving on his program. What's going on? Is it the program itself, or is it other stressors outside the program? What a lot of times I will find is guys are doing extra workouts and they have so much training stress going on, the body's not able to recover.
Oh, wow.
So they have to pull that off or
That's
modify
unexpected.
it. Yeah,
wow.
modify it a little bit.
So they're overworking?
Some can. Others is the recovery side, right? They're not getting enough sleep at night. Oh, we know that about
military.
I've been in the Army for 20 years. I swear I'm still trying to catch up on sleep. But that is a significant issue. And what is what if they are getting 8 hours sleep, but the quality of sleep is low? What's causing that? That causes those dive in, and typically what we find is the big three. It's caffeine, alcohol, and nicotine, right?
Caffeine, alcohol, nicotine.
And
that's a reoccurring theme there.
Yeah. So that's where I want personally within our program is I like to leverage AI and machine learning to really kind of help take it a couple of steps further, dive into it, help with identifying red flags, so we can further personalize the treatment or the training for that HWS.
Yeah, identify red flags so we can reduce potential injuries, and also identify green flags so we can double down on what's working.
Exactly.
So it can work in both ways,
right.
Sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes back to the base mission of what HP and HPO has become in the military is to reduce injury rates, improve combat regeneration, followed by performance. So that's really what the initial idea of HP has come down to, at least my gathering of reading the history of the literature of HP and DoD for the past 20 plus years. And so
HP, Human Performance, DoD, Department of Defense.
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
No, that definitely makes sense. So, Chris, you mentioned different domains earlier. You also mentioned making data-driven decisions, leveraging AI and technology. But the domains also sound like they can be from a rehab space or a physical therapist space, but you're talking musculoskeleton. Is there any way you work with others?
Yeah. So here locally, and the great thing about the position I'm in, I've been able to see our program grow from its infancy to where it's at now, and it's still expanding and based on their needs analysis, adapting appropriately. But with our current program, we're lucky enough to have a physical therapist on the staff, which I'm able to work with on a daily basis for the MSK domain. We have a social worker that works onto the psychological and social domain. And we've also got a medical team as well. So we have a PA and an IDMT. Don't ask me what IDMT stands for.
Something important. Something important.
We have an Air Force medic, and he's a great.
The medic. That's a good. I will take that. We'll take that.
Great guy. He knows his stuff. He's been doing it for 20 plus years. He teaches me stuff every day. And so we're lucky to have this domain. And so if you can see, we're working on like a four domain model. We technically have 5 because I do also fill in as a nutritionist. I'm not a dietitian, so there's limitations in that. But I do fill in. So we 4.5. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
So that's our domain based off the resources that we have, fiscal, and the personnel available. The great thing about this is with our model, it really helps with access to healthcare. So again, we go back to what I said. If you look at the mission set of HP is to improve recovery rates, improve recovery rates, reduce injuries, improve combat regeneration, followed by performance. This really does that. So, for example, when we first got our physical therapist, wait times for guys to get their first appointment was upwards of 6 weeks. By having him here, they're able to reduce that to 3 days and eventually get it down to one. So that first touch point after the initial injury is really crucial to reducing injury recovery times as well, and also then getting ahead of power curve of actual injuries as well. So having that just automatically reduced injury recovery times and injury rates. And then you can little things like that you can put into your return on investment metrics, right? Loss of man hours, cost of waiting to go, travel to go see the proper PT, little things like that. So it really helped with the fiscal side and also man hour side. Same thing with having a physician's assistant on our team, and it just brings that access to healthcare one step closer to the warfighter. So our guys, they would have to go see main medical treatment facility and then wait to get an appointment. Here we have it in house, which again reduces lost man hours. And if it needs a little more if that person needs a little more specialized care, our PA is able to make those appointments and help connect those dots a little bit too. So it helps that access to healthcare, and it really helps when we look at our continuum, the healthcare continuum, where we're in a very reactive state. We're able to move it a few steps closer to being more preventative. And that's really what our program is really trying to get after, is access to healthcare and move it from a reactive to a preventative state.
Yeah, that's a big word, preventative, and less reactive. All right, so we heard the positives of using data, using AI, and leveraging technology to close gaps from healthcare to finding out why someone isn't performing at their peak performance or predicting an injury in advance, which can close days of time lag. But let's talk about some of the concerns of leveraging technology and what are the barriers that are involved in implementing it at scale.
Definitely. So one of the first things is, and you kind of touched on it, with injury, right? A lot of people think that you can use technology to predict injuries. You really can't. You can use technology to identify indicators that may make people more prone to injury, per se, but you cannot predict it. So Murphy happens. It's Murphy's Law.
Murphy's Law.
Yeah. So you can't.
Anything that can go wrong will go wrong.
So that's the first thing I always try to communicate with my guys, and whenever I talk about programs, is be very careful on the technologies that say that they can predict injury, because you can't. But you can look at indicators, and when you have certain indicators, you may be more prone. Again, may be more prone. That's about as best we can get right now, based on what we know within, from research. Is okay. If you've got these factors, okay, if you strengthen those up, you may reduce your chance for injury. So that's the first thing. That's a very important piece to kind of tease out. The second piece is trying to utilize the technology, because it takes time to put it on, right? Yeah, there's little things where, like the Oura Ring, slipped it on, your smartwatch is integrated, but like glucose monitors, most of those are interstitial. So that means is they have a filament as part of the sensor that goes underneath the skin and into the capillary bed, and that's where they measure the analytes. And that involves a needle, injecting it in. So not a lot of, guys don't like needles. The biggest
warfighters, the strongest warfighters don't like those needles.
Yeah, so there's that. And it just takes time. It just even, one of my favorite pieces of technology is near-infrared spectroscopy. And these sensors aren't very big. I mean, if you look at, one of my favorites is Moxie.
Yep.
Yep, they, Rob over there is great, man. But they're really small, but they do take time to put on, because especially if you're putting it in an area that's high mobility, you have to tape it up. And you cannot allow light in. So you have to use dark tape. You got to make sure it's covered.
Yeah, what do they do again?
So near infrared spectroscopy, also known as NIRS, for short, it just measures the oxygenated and deoxygenated hemoglobin, part of the red blood cells. And really, when we look at it in physiological terms or in sports terms, is just the oxygen onloading and offloading of the working muscle. Basically, how much oxygen is that working muscle really getting from the red blood cells?
What happens when your muscle runs out of oxygen, or can that happen?
Oh yeah. So if you're doing high anaerobic activity, yeah,
Like biking, running,
right, or sprinting.
Sprinting.
If you're using high intensity intervals, or if you're doing like 400s, 800s, threshold repeats, yeah, that will drop at certain rates. The higher the intensity, the faster it'll drop. So you're burning energy faster than you can produce it. So you're going into an anaerobic state. Anaerobic just means without oxygen.
And that's when I feel tired.
You can, yes, because you're at high exertion. But it's all on energy systems. So
Okay, I see.
when we talk about oxidative phosphorylation, also known as aerobic respiration, you're using oxygen to produce ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is basically the energy currency for the human body. When you start moving to anaerobic, so you have two different energy systems for that. Anaerobic is without oxygen, right? So you're producing less ATP, but you can produce it faster. Right? And so you have so you've got what's called anaerobic respiration, and then you've got the phosphagen pathway. Phosphagen is really quick. So if you move your finger, right, you're producing ATP it's a 1-to-1. You're producing it really quick. You're not producing aerobic respiration to move your finger, right? But if you're sprinting, so if you're doing a 100-yard dash, that, good day, 8 seconds, right, in your heyday. Right? No, but anywhere between 3 to 5 seconds, right? So that big sprint, like 20 yards, reactive, knee jerk. That's the phosphagen pathway. It's really quick, very short though. But when you start moving to the anaerobic respiration, also known as glycolysis, is you're producing upwards to 5 to 8, depending on who you talk to, molecules of ATP for one molecule of glucose, which is simple sugar or monosaccharide. That's very short. So if you're looking like your 100-meter dash, your 100-yard dash, when you're doing high intensity lifting, right? You're lifting weights, your traditional 4x10s or 5x5s, right? Bigger, faster, stronger. Those are glycolytic or anaerobic respiration. Then you start transitioning down to lower intensity, longer duration. If you realize the two variables we're playing on when we talk about energy systems is intensity versus duration. So higher the intensity, lower the duration. They're inverses of each other. And so as you bring down the intensity, the longer you can go. And that helps denote energy systems as well. And so like when you're running a marathon, you're definitely you're aerobic. You're using oxidative phosphorylation. So that's where this kind of all comes into. And when you look at NIRS, right, so oxygen is that component for these different energy systems. I know I've gone all the way around to come back to this.
Yeah, we're in class.
But,
Get your nose ready.
Yeah, so the thought process is like, okay, if you're dropping below, you're getting too low on your muscle oxygenation levels, you're no longer aerobic, you're anaerobic, and then you're gonna burn out pretty
Burn
quickly.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I
because you
feel.
just have no energy left.
Like, I remember so many times running a 100-yard dash at 15 miles per hour, 16 miles per hour. But I only do that for short periods of time.
And that's what it is.
Without my legs feel like they're giving up on me.
Yeah,
but I'm still alive. Yeah,
there's two things going on with that. That burn that you're feeling is lactate. Some people call it lactic acid. I refer to it as let me roll that back. It's actually not the lactate. It's the hydrogen ions. It's the acid component. So people talk about lactic acid. It changes almost immediately. So I don't really like that term. Even when I teach it to undergrads, it's lactate and hydrogen ions. So lactate, these are byproducts of anaerobic respiration, which is both your phosphagen and your glycolytic pathways. Those are both parts of it. Lactate gets reshuttled down to the liver through the Cori cycle and produced into ATP again. So great. So it's refueled, but it's the hydrogen ions that are what's causing acute metabolic acidosis. That's that burning effect, right? So the pH in the blood locally is dropping a little bit. So how's the body get around that? Well, for one is respiration. You breathe it off really quickly. So part of it is even though you have an increased oxygen demand, which is causing you to breathe a little bit faster and also higher carbon dioxide rates, in the brainstem, you have a lot of this what we call chemoreceptors that modulate respiration that helps breathe that off really quickly. So it's just a byproduct, but that's that burning feeling. But when the pH drops, it denatures the enzymes and the proteins that are part of these pathways to produce ATP.
So are you telling me that humans can go past the 8 seconds they can run 15 miles per hour if they don't care about the burning sensation?
To an extent.
To an extent, yeah.
There's only
how
so
far can we
much,
push
right?
ourselves?
Yeah, there's always that cognitive side of it, right? How much of the suck are you willing to put up with? But there's also the energy limitation. In this case, it's a lot more the energy limitation versus that cognitive
Energy
side.
limitations,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
So you can train to improve it a little bit, but not by much. Especially with the populations we're working with where they're highly trained, right? So
Two things, Chris. First thing is just want to acknowledge one of the ways that we actually bumped into each other, because you're way in Germany and we're way in Texas. Howdy. Is through the works of AFWorks and something called a CBER, Small Business Innovation Research. And in terms of the App Force, it is considered a contracting vehicle to work on innovation awards. But one of the things we had to do as a technology company in the healthcare space, helping people with diabetes stay at a hospital, it's one of our biggest causes, is how might we apply that to the world of human performance, specifically for App First, especially when you talk about research of human performance. One of the barriers that we kept getting hit with in our proposals was on the security of having, Bluetooth signals, Wi-Fi signals, and these different GPS signals that can be picked up by the opposition. So I would love for you to elaborate on, how others, maybe you're a small business thinking about wanting to work with the government, or are you just a concerned individual? Are you a strength and conditioning coach looking to implement this on your site as well?
Yeah, so part of it, again, goes back to the needs analysis and really what questions you're trying to answer. Ideally, for someone like me, I want to try to create like the digital twin and then be able to, here in Garrison, safe environment, then be able to apply it to the tactical. So when you start going into these tactical austere environments, there's a lot more precautions you have to look at. So, for example, when you have a fire team walking through the woods, right? Let's say you got 12 guys in a ranger file. All of a sudden, you got 12 dots of Bluetooth signals coming up. You're giving away your position, especially when surprise and stealth is the name of the game. And you can go to Radio Shack, or I know they're not around anymore, but you can easily get online, pick up a Bluetooth sensing device that can just pick up. You go in your house and you pick up all the Bluetooth signals. This is the same methodology. So that's the last thing that we want to go on to. The security of Bluetooth is not. It's not 100% secure. I think that's even being generous. So that's the last thing you want to do is even if it's just a one-way sensor, if it's like the glucose monitor, that's a one-way, just talks to your phone. You still don't want that cracked because that leaves a doorway into the phone itself, which can then exploit the information too. So it's the security of the data. It's really the positional part of the data that we're really concerned with. a lot of the times to get around it is just adding in an on-off switch. So you still have the device collecting, but it's not transmitting. And then as soon as you turn it back on, it does a data dump. So, for example, a lot of the Garmin watches now, or even the Oura rings, they have either stealth mode or airplane mode.
Stealth mode, airplane
Yeah, so
mode.
you can still it's still collecting the data, but it's turned off. It's not transmitting. So it's it's just a standalone object. And then when you activate it again, it does that data dump when you're in a secure location. So there's little things like that that we really have to be concerned about looking at. And I know I'm only just touching the surface of it, but this is what I know and the concerns that I've had here at the tactical level that I really have to look at concern-wise when I start looking and implementing technologies.
Yeah, so it doesn't sound like we quite made it to the area of wearable technology where it is, especially we're using a radio like Bluetooth to communicate, where it's safe enough for warfighters to be fighting, and Bluetooth transmissions are going back and forward because we can figure out your location, right? I know there are probably some issues with that in the past. That's a very clear example. And you also mentioned some ways around it of going stealth or airplane. Which one you prefer, stealth or airplane?
Stealth, of course.
Stealth, okay. I thought you were going to say airplane because we like Air Force. But stealth will work out, and go for a data dump or transmission type of thing. We talked about data. We talked about AI pros and cons. We talked about interdisciplinary team. One of the things I definitely want to talk about is the warfighter themselves. And, when you're having 6 streams of information that you're seeing, how are you even communicating or making it effective for them to use it when you're educating them?
Yeah, so it's really taking that data and making it what they've called actionable data.
Actionable.
Yeah, so I mean, it's all just put in the context and in the language that they speak. So my population of warfighters speaks different language than, like, say, Army or Navy, right? It's put into language that they will understand and that they can make changes with. So, I mean, you're using a Super Sapien CGM, right? And you're getting your blood glucose your live blood glucose. So what? Right?
So what?
It's really being able to give that, explain that actionable data to get to the so what to make those meaningful changes. That's what it was trying to. So then that's that education component, but understanding, how they talk, putting it in their language, and that's a learning curve for the practitioner.
Oh, really?
The strength coach, yeah. And so being able to speak their speak and help them understand, okay, this is what it's for, this is what you can do with this piece of information.
Yeah, one of the words I'm thinking of when you say this is buy-in.
Yeah.
That's a huge word, and if you're a Division I coach, you got to worry about buy-in, and it sounds like there's also buy-in on the tactical special force.
So.
Oh, okay.
More so. I mean, it's a brotherhood. So we could talk data all day long. We could talk AI. We could talk about the most elegant periodized strength conditioning program. That doesn't mean anything unless you have the appropriate relationships with the guys. And the buy-in. It's, buy-in can come a couple different ways. It can come top down, bottom up. The bottom up is the most important because those are the guys I work with on a daily basis. And it's that relationship. It's genuinely caring about them. Not just their needs in the weight room, but outside of that.
Okay.
It's basic personal relationships and applying that, because at the end of the day, I'm here to support them. And you have to make them bigger, faster, stronger, but more resilient. And that's what it comes down to, is caring and acting upon that care. So you can have all this other stuff. If you don't have this, the buy-in and the relationships, you're not going to be optimized, and it's just not going to work.
Oh.
So.
Now, that's a great topic. That kind of goes into what type of advice would you give the strength and conditioning coach, the data nerd, the data scientist who's interested in create their own human weapon system program similar to yours as they move forward.
Yeah. So first step that it's lesson 101 is needs analysis. Conduct your needs analysis.
What is that composed of?
So it's a 3-step process. It's at least in this case is looking at the mission, right? Answering the mission or looking the unit organization, little things like that. Getting the kind of the hierarchical look at. Next is looking at the career field. And those, analyzing the career fields, injury rates, number of people, age, anthropometrics, all that other stuff. And then you compare them, right? So you're able to identify what you have, gaps, strength, common strengths and limiters. And that's your first thing you do. It just helps give you an overarching view. Second step, shut up and listen. Don't come in just trying to make changes right away. And this is coming from personal experience. Shut up, listen, talk to the guys, start building a relationship, shake their hands.
Oh wow!
Make it is personal. It really is. And so you got to have that, and because these guys are the pointy tip of the spear, but they're still human beings at heart. They are, and that is just as important of understanding, the objective stuff. There's still those soft skills that you need to develop as well. Then, when you start understanding them more, you're understanding the way the NSCA, the National Strength and Conditioning Association, has when they talk about the needs analysis is doing the athlete profile. In this case, it's doing the HWS profile individually, right? It's both the career field and the individual. And so if you have the ability to understand each individual of your football team, right, that makes it stronger. And you can incorporate as many you'll start seeing common needs of those individuals, right, for that organization. And then you can start applying those themes to your training process. So that's another way to kind of add a little level of individualization in there as well. So, and then that's what I'm saying is if you want to do yours, you got to do the needs analysis first. So to help you understand the unit, the culture, the population you're working at, but also understanding the other tangibles, the money, the time available, the commander's intent, all of that. And that's where you got to start going. And then I follow basically, systems analysis protocols after that. Once you get set up, you got to place your stakes somewhere. Go there. After you get it going, you start doing your evaluation.
Yeah, and let's pop up a little diagram right here to show what you're talking about. But keep it going.
Yeah, and then so you're doing that evaluation. You figure out what's working. What's not working. Start addressing that, and you're just constantly iterating to try to improve. Right, whether it's on the hard stuff like improving your performance scores, or working the soft side of improving a little more buy-in, right? And then when you start getting those red flags, like you dive in. What's the issue? What's causing this, right? And then trying to find courses of action to improve upon it.
Yeah, if things are going well, keep it going. If things are not going well, let's come up with a plan to make it better.
The last thing you want to do is just become stagnant, and that's where that evaluation, or not stagnant, but complacent. Yeah, and that's what if you do that every so often. I try to do it once a year, just because my population's high turnover, so it's always changing.
Well, there you have it, guys. Talked about the human weapon system with Dr. Christopher Myers. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.